Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and today we're here to continue our journey into the realm of subjectivity, an ISTJ's least favorite thing, but yet we're introverts, so our dominant function is going to be subjective. So, gotta love being walking contradictions, right? I thought that was only the INFJ that did that. Anyway, last episode of Info Dumping, we talked about introverted thinking and introverted feeling, which are the two introverted judging functions and are the dominant functions for the IP types. And to give a brief recap of what I said in that last episode, introverted feeling, the dominant function for the IFPs, is going to be about their own personal values and morals and what they personally feel is right. So they're not necessarily going to have an external system of values and emotions to go off of. They're going to say, this is what I feel is the right thing. This is my emotions. So therefore, subjective. Conversely, the ITPs are going to lead with introverted thinking. So they're going to say, what do I think makes the most logical sense? How do I break down each of these elements in a way that I personally can comprehend? So unless if you stop all the I, me statements, you're not going to be able to convince me that any of this is objective. But now we're getting into the perceiving functions, which I think people are a bit more willing to accept that these are subjective because they're perceiving. And basically the difference between perceiving and judging in Myers-Briggs is that judging is a way of enforcing a way of being. In the case of the EJs, it's about making sure that society as a whole is following this system of getting things done. Or in terms of harmony, in the case of the EFJs. In the terms of the IP types, it's a system of belief that because they believe it, it must therefore be true, and they get mad at anyone else for disagreeing. Unless if they're the really healthy versions, where they might say, like, well, your personal emotions are yours and mine are mine, and we can just agree to disagree. That leads to postmodernism, so maybe not. That is why the IP types are considered judgers in socionics, because they're still going to really make sure they're enforcing whatever it is they're feeling or thinking, depending on if they're a T or an F. So, like, if you disagree with an INTP's reasoning, they are going to be very upset about it and possibly even say that you're a stupid idiot because you don't dare understand their genius. So, see, there's that enforcing. So, the IJ types are considered perceivers in socionics because they're all about taking in information and processing it. So introverted sensing, which is used by the ISJs in the dominant and all of the SJs in the top two, is going to be taking in sensory details that the person has recognized from the past and comparing it and contrasting it to the present to find something that is the most safe and the most sustainable. Like, they want long-term comfort. But the introverted intuitives are going to look at various patterns and vibes that they're detecting and then use it to try to find the ultimate, deeper truth toward a particular concept or idea. Usually the INJ types are the most futuristic out of all the types, and so they'll have like their goals of what they want and who they want to get married to. A lot of them probably have this figured out by the age of 2. But here's why it's subjective. Let's start with the SJs and why introverted sensing is subjective. Because a lot of it is based on their personal observations of the past. So a lot of SJs have incredibly good memories. In fact, I'd say that's the definition of an SJ. Is according to David Keirsey's temperament theory, all of the SJs are known as guardians, which means that they like to preserve. They like to think what has worked before and how can we make sure to preserve it for the next generation. But in the case of the ISJs, they want to think about their own comfort more than they want to think about the comfort of other people. So ISTJs are going to think, okay, what has been efficient in the past? And ISFJs might say, what are some common ways of helping people that have worked in the past? I mean, both types are going to want to help people. They're SJs, so of course they're going to be affiliative and group-oriented. They're just going to go about it differently depending on if they're a feeler or a thinker. But again, the reason it's subjective is because most of the things that they are perceiving are from their personal experience. ISTJs and ISFJs could go on and on about what they've experienced and what they've remembered. And the ISTJs lacking the extroverted thinking might blab on and on about a particular experience they had exactly 10 years, 1 month, and 2 days ago. and they'll talk about how it changed their life, and they'll mention every single sensory details. ISFJs might have a bit more tact because they have extroverted feeling, but if you were to give them permission, oh boy, they could probably be just as detailed as the ISTJs. But they're still going to want to have that internal sense of routine, and that's why Myers-Briggs classifies them as judgers, because they want that structure. They want to say, okay, in the past, doing this routine in exactly this method has achieved stability. So take me, for example. I am not going to like trying new things because why? There's a possibility of danger, there's a possibility of risk, and there's also dopamine. For me, like, I get a dopamine rush from familiarity. And so when I'm keeping something running for several years, like, for example, this YouTube channel, it gives me a sense of euphoria to keep it going because it's subjective. It's introverted. So it's not talking about sensory experiences around me that I can't deny. It's my experiences, what I have smelled, what I have tasted, what routines have worked for me in the past that I'm going to keep doing for hopefully the rest of my life. And usually, if you're trying to convince an SJ that they're wrong, you have to appeal to their secondary function and tell them, okay, well, based on these criteria of these other people, I think you should do it. And usually they'll be pretty good at reacting to that because they're perceiving types. They are much more easygoing than the EJ and the IP types. They might say, oh, well, based on this new information that I am perceiving, I could probably adjust my stance, not a problem. Now let's get into introverted intuition, which is the dominant function for INTJs and INFJs and is used in the top two by all of the NJ types. Introverted intuition is going to be a bit more abstract by nature. It's going to look at patterns and commonalities, and it's going to take a bunch of sources and try to think, how can we get the big picture out of all of these various pieces of data? So a lot of times they're more interested in stuff like vibes and undertones and metaphors and stuff like that. But what separates them from the extroverted intuitives is that they're going to be a lot more focused when it comes to their goals. They might stick to one goal or one project, and that'll be it. They won't be constantly jumping from thing to thing like an ENFP or an ENTP would. Typically, it's pretty hard to convince an INJ to change their mind about something. I've tried, and very, very rarely have I ever succeeded. Why? Because it's subjective. They have their ideas of what they believe is the ultimate path towards their goal. And if you try to tell, for instance, an INTJ, okay, you're overthinking this whole romance thing. Just appreciate being single and don't worry so much about getting a girl. If it happens, it happens. Whatever. Oh, that's one of the quickest ways to get on an INTJ's nerves. He or she will say, are you kidding me? This is what I really want, and I'm going to be miserable if my wishes don't come true. See? A lot of I, me statements. So therefore, it's subjective because they have perceived ways in which they see the future unfolding, and it's very hard to convince them otherwise because it's their dominant function. So they are constantly going to be thinking about all these undertones and these vibes, and especially the INFJs, where they come across as fortune tellers, where they're like, I can look at this person's face and I can immediately know what this person is thinking. Why? I don't know how to describe it. My introverted thinking is in the third, but I know it's true. And if they happen to be wrong, oh boy, are they going to try to over-explain. But the bottom line is that INFJs and INTJs are not going to want to be talked out of their goals and their hunches. ISTJs and ISFJs are not going to want to be talked out of their routines and their memories. If you try to tell them, hey, your memory's faulty, or you try to tell them, what a stupid routine, open up and lighten up, they're going to be really offended by that. You tell an INFJ or an INTJ, why do you have so many goals? Why not just live life in the moment and enjoy yourself? They're going to be offended by that. Why? Because whenever you have one perceiving function in the dominant, you're going to have the opposite one in the inferior. So every INJ with introverted intuition is going to have extroverted sensing as their inferior. Now, the inferior function is the function that we repress, that scares us, that we're like, I don't really like that part of myself. So INFJs and INTJs are going to be repressing what is happening in the moment, meaning that they're always going to be looking ahead without wanting to think about what's actually going on. So you don't typically see a whole lot of INFJs and INTJs saying, man, my life is just going great right now. I'm totally content with just staying this way the rest of my life. They're always going to be thinking ahead to the next step. Heck, I bet even like an INTJ, when he's like the day before his death, is probably thinking about what he's going to do in heaven. I seriously don't think they have a pause button when it comes to thinking about the future. But then you take the ISTJs and ISFJs, they have extroverted intuition in the inferior, which means that they are not going to like the idea of trying something that's more experimental. They're going to say, well, this has proven to be effective in the past, so therefore, why should I try something new? Because it's abstract. It hasn't been proven. It's not sensory. I can't detect it with my 5 senses. So what are you supposed to do if they're so stubborn that their way of perceiving the world is true? In the case of the INJs, you often have to convince them that what they're doing in the moment is not necessarily counter to their goals, or you have to tell them that maybe other people's reasoning could be potentially used here. Now, I think the INFJs are a bit better at this because they have extroverted feeling, so they might be willing to slightly adjust themselves if people's feelings are hurt. But you can still tell that they are not dominant feelers, because you'll see INFJs a lot where they'll just be like, okay, I get what you're saying, but no, this is how I am going to do it because this is my way of getting to my future. So they're still going to have that stubborn side that all the perceiving types have. But if you potentially tell them, hey, right now, you don't have any means of getting to your goal. So why don't you just enjoy yourself right now, be thankful where you are right now, and worry about the future some other time. For just like maybe 5 minutes. Give yourself the freedom to relax. And let me tell you, some INTJs and INFJs really like their sensory pleasures if they've learned not to repress their extroverted sensing. I know a few INJs that really like dancing, for example. They say, oh, in the moment I just get so lost in the music and the feeling of other people's hands when I'm dancing, and that's the kind of thing we want to see from them, so that they're not constantly thinking, what's next, what's next, what's next, what's next, and then bump into what's right in front of them. That's what leads to car crashes, people. I fear for my life sometimes when I'm in the car with INJs. But conversely, for the ISJs, what are you supposed to do to talk them out of their routine? Very, very slowly. Give them a safe environment where they don't feel like they have to be at risk. To give you an example, one of my friends recently was trying to get me to try Indian food, and I was like, no, thank you. That could be potentially dangerous. And so she said, what if I just gave you a spoonful of this Indian food? Then you wouldn't have to eat all of it if you didn't like it. I was like, okay, I guess a spoonful is not going to hurt. Like, it's not going to be wasting the food because you'll just eat the rest of it. In that instance, there wasn't anything to fear in that moment, and because I'm the inferior intuitive, she, being the dominant intuitive, was able to say, okay, I will worry about all of the possible unknown hypothetical variables, and I will be the one protecting you from all the stuff that you're worried about. And of course, being an extroverted thinker, I think I generally also respond better to people providing an objective analysis of the facts if I'm going to change my mind. I struggle to think of examples off the top of my head, but I used to be a very stubborn person. Like, I would always want my chair. I'd want to do things exactly the same. I'd want to be exactly on time for everything. And I still kind of am like that. Like, I still sit at the same chair for every meal. I still wake up at the exact same time every day. Well, almost every day. When I'm on a work day, I will wake up at the same time every single morning. And I will be very upset if that routine is altered. But if someone gives me facts to prove that my routine is stupid, I'll usually be willing to accommodate. I'm not a judging type. I want to take in information first. So I might say, oh, well, you've provided facts that show that my diet is crummy. Maybe I should change my diet. But unlike the EJ types who tend to be very impulsive and not take the time to analyze the situation, I might say, okay, even if objectively there's a better way I should be doing this, I might not have the means to make it possible. And according to Linda Behrens, that's what makes me a progression type. But we're not here to talk about Linda Behrens just yet. For now, I think one thing that the EJs and the IP types struggle with comprehending is nuance. They see this idea of, it must be true, it's gotta be true, hurry up and make up your mind. And the IJs and EPs are like, slow down, let's take in the information. But then they can annoy the EJs and the IPs because they are taking too much time to think. And they might, not be able to take action when it's actually needed. I know for me, like, if I don't understand a task, I'm not necessarily going to know how to just execute a decision. I'm going to want to ask permission from a higher up. The extroverted thinking secondary is way different than in the dominant in that position. And so I guess both types can learn to take each other's approach of their dominant functions helping them to do stuff faster or slower. Maybe the IJs can learn to trust what the people are saying, either logically or emotionally, depending on the F or the T. And I suppose the IP types could learn to slow down a bit and analyze the situation better. But as far as how to get the IJ types to be more objective, they're more objective than you think. Like the ISTJs and the INTJs are typically going to be really keen on making sure that they research a lot because they're extroverted thinkers. So they're going to want to know, what do the charts say? What do the experts say? What are everyone else's logical conclusions? So that I'm not coming to my own reasoning, because that's postmodern. I want to look at what is the truth. Not my truth, not your truth, but the truth. And the INFJs and the ISFJs, they're going to look at other people's feelings, and they're not going to try to intuit their own personal emotions into it. If anything, they forget about their own emotions in the moment because they're so busy thinking about everyone else's. So in that sense, they could say, okay, I am going to take action in the moment because this person is upset. So there is a certain level of objectivity that can help them because they have their secondary functions. And I think if most IJs are willing to study the secondary function and get it to the point where they can use it relatively regularly as much as they would their dominant perceivers, they're actually more capable than they give themselves credit for. A lot of people say that I'm too hard on myself, and I agree. I'm often saying, oh, no way would I ever be able to do that, because I'm ascertaining what I know. But other people are able to use their intuition to say, I can see more in you than what you're seeing because your intuition is so bad. You're only seeing what your senses have taken in, but we use more than senses. In the same way, I can often tell off the intuitives, like, you're missing out on so much of the world because you're so busy thinking ahead. Look at all the beautiful things around you and enjoy life. Stop thinking about what it could be and appreciate what it is. So we can all learn from each other. And if you don't take anything else out of this video, just try to be the best version of yourself. Try to have a balance between all four of your cognitive functions so that you can be both a judger and a perceiver, both a thinker and a feeler, both a sensor and an intuitive. Because if someone is too much of anything, that's what leads to the comical stereotypes, and we don't want that. As an introverted feeler, I want to be different. So I guess that's me developing my tertiary function, and me developing my inferior function is wanting to find creative ways to be different. So if I can do it, I think you all can do it. I think some types are more willing to try that out than others. Like, good luck getting an ESTJ to be willing to cry on the spot and talk about their feelings, but it could happen. We'll just pray that one of these days people are open to the idea of just using every single thing that God has given us to their full potential. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know down in the comment section what you think about all this, and if you agree that if you're an IJ type that you're extremely subjective, or try to argue that you're not. You'll probably end up making a subjective argument anyway, so good luck. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!